So, very welcome to this European Science Café on resilience in a chaotic world. So this event is part of European Researchers' Night, which is a collaboration between the Swedish Researchers Friday, Forskarfredag, and Science in the City in Malta. So very welcome to you students here from Victor Rydberg Upper Secondary School here in Stockholm, and you around Europe who are joining this event online. And there are also some students coming, I think, from Södra Latin Upper Secondary School here in Stockholm. So, welcome to this Science Café. Have you been to a Science Café before? No? Okay. So this is a very informal concept. So to try to allow people and researchers to meet, to interact, discuss topics related to science and research. So a Science Café starts with very, very brief introductions from the invited researchers, and then we open up the floor to everyone to give your comments, your thoughts, maybe some questions that you would like to ask. To do this smoothly, we put out some papers and pens for you in the room. And for you who are attending online, you can use the chat. So just write down wherever your thoughts are. And I will get help from my colleagues in the room to sort out the questions and try to use so many thoughts and comments as possible. So, I'm very happy to present to you our three researchers. And I would like you all to introduce yourselves and your take on this challenging topic. So the topic will be, how can we cope with the many challenges of today? We know that we've been through a pandemic, there's a European war going on, we have this global climate crisis. Can culture and knowledge help? So what are your thoughts? And I would like first to introduce to you Dr. Margaret Jean Westby, who now lives and works in Malta, at the University of Malta. She's engaged in dance studies. And you have a truly transdisciplinary and also transnational background. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, and also your thoughts about how we can be resilient in this chaotic world. Please, Margaret.
Hello.
Now we can hear you, please.
Yeah. Very nice to have. Thank you for having me. My name is Margaret Westby, and I am originally from the States, but I've actually lived in the UK, Canada, and Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, and I'm now based here in Malta. So quite a global perspective. And my research is quite interdisciplinary as well. I look at issues of agency, materiality, and embodiment within dance. The body is my material. Looking at human and technology relations and trying to create more healing and caring relations between that. In terms of this topic, it is huge. And as I do come from the body, I really sort of want to give my knowledge from that. So first and foremost, really starting to pay attention to the breath, and this was particularly important within COVID, and also really to foster somatic practices where we really understand knowledge coming from the mind, beliefs, emotions, relations, resilience, adaptations through our bodies to collective bodies to really tackle issues of anxiety, crisis, and more. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Margaret. So let's talk to Dr. Conor McGookin, because you work at the Environmental Research Institute at the University of Cork in Ireland. But you told me that you're originally from Northern Ireland, and that you're sorry that you don't speak Irish because you could use it now. So why is that? And tell us a little bit more about your research and your take on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, CC. Yeah, I suppose the reason I was disappointed I don't speak Irish is because during my PhD I spent a lot of time on the Dingle Peninsula, which would be quite well known internationally because it was where Luke Skywalker was found in the most recent Star Wars saga. But also before that, it was very popular with Americans who could trace a lot of roots there. And it's a protected whale-tucked area, so it's very important from a natural environmental perspective, but also from a cultural perspective because it's one of the few places where we actually still speak Irish as a first language. So that's quite important sensitivities there. And yeah, my research interest is in energy system modeling. So these are tools we can use to represent society, which is quite simple. We look at the number of cars or types of buildings and the fuels they use in order to try to see how we can remove fossil fuels and reduce our CO2 emissions. My particular interest is in participatory methods, so working with people as part of that analytical process, so we can bring in a broader representation of what the energy system actually means to people. Because, I suppose my experience working with community groups down in Dingle and indeed in engagements like this, talking to people about the fuels they use or their emissions is not a very productive way to get them to think about the future. You need to relate it to their experiences or why they use energy in a particular way, or what is, how they get around, and the options or the lack of options actually in most cases that might cause them to be reliant on a car or to be using solid fuel in heating. I suppose bringing it back to this, one of the key things that's come out of my experience is the kind of cross-cutting meaning associated with resilience. To me, coming from climate change research, resilience means climate adaptation, so flood barriers or on rivers, planting more trees. But to an elderly person in a rural community, resilience means having a warm, comfortable home and having a kind of long-term future for their family. So it's much more social or well-being meanings attached to it. And I think that's where this intersection of culture and knowledge is quite important, because we can see from a knowledge point of view where our sources of emissions are, but it's only through things like culture we can actually understand what it means to people or where the gaps might be in our understanding.
Okay, thank you. Just ask you, you talk about participatory processes of different kinds. So how do you actually engage people in your research? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, in a few different ways. I suppose for the purpose of the scenarios that I developed on the Dingle Peninsula, we had a series of 15 community meetings, which were in the 7 parishes around the area. So the area is broken up into roughly 7 little small areas. It's only a population of 12,500. So some of the communities we went into, when you break it up into 7, were as small as 500-600 people. So it's quite real when you're in a room of 40 people that represent 400. That's 10% of the population, which was why we chose a small community instead of trying to do it nationally. It's quite difficult to have a conversation nationally about our emissions, but on a smaller scale it's easier. And yeah, I suppose the key thing I did was just to work with a community development organization. So it was part of a broader community development process about what a sustainable future means to people across social, economic and environmental concerns. So talking about climate and energy, but also thinking about, well, if we don't have young families settling in the area and we're not looking after the most vulnerable in our society, then how can we be talking about reducing our emissions by 50% or getting rid of fossil fuels, because we're not even doing the basics right.
Okay, thank you. So here in the room we have Associate Professor Beate Schirrmacher, and you're based at Linnaeus University in southern Sweden, and also a member of something called Humtank, which is like a network within people in the humanities.
Yes.
So you can tell me a little bit about Humtank maybe, and also about your research, obviously. Do you believe that with cultural expressions can help us be more resilient in this chaotic world? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I do, for 2 reasons.
Okay.
Both I'm a member of Humtank, which is a network, an organization of researchers in the humanities, and we work for giving humanist researchers a voice in the public debate. And what are the humanities, one might ask then? That are all the disciplines that study human thoughts, creations, and the way we remember literary studies, history of ideas, history, film, archaeology, visual arts. So we in Humtank work to say and adding a humanist perspective to every social idea.
Okay.
So this is why I'm here to talk about resilience. And I'm also here because I came into this topic in one of my research projects that was about, I'm a literary scholar, and I'm interested in the relation between music and literature. And I was interested in the question, why is it so often that music, so often classical music, so often appears in the context of violence? For instance, why does Hannibal Lecter listen to Bach? Why does Alex, the hooligan, and Clockwork Orange both love violence and Beethoven? Is this what does this mean? Is this just to create just a big contrast, or is it to tell us that the violence is beautiful or the music bad? When I looked into that, I found this is not quite true, but there is a link between music and violence, as they both touch us physically. But this does not mean that we say music is the same as violence. Usually, music can become violence or an assault if we do not have control about it. So what these films and novels do is that they use this connection that we usually do not think about in order to make us understand something about other connections in the world that are difficult to cope with. For instance, Clockwork Orange is about you cannot have people with free will without that some of these people will break the rules. I watched another film, a quite recent film that is called Woman at War, who used this connection between music and violent destruction to say something about how ecological and economical questions are related. You can't have the one without the other. So what these novels and films do that I looked into is that they, when you read them or watch them, they challenge our human ambiguity and tolerance that we do not like. We like ambiguity when it's a joke and when we know that this is a joke, but we do not like ambiguity when we have to make decisions. I think you all felt that in the corona pandemic, for instance, that we want to know, is this right or wrong? Should I do this or should I do that? So instead, these novels were examples for how art and culture does something else. They confront us with these difficulties and say, this is how it is. Deal with it, cope with it, and we can do that as long as it is a film and a novel. But it also trains us in a way to deal with these more complex relationships, and that how can art and culture make us more resilient is that being aware of that these complex questions are that culture and literature and film and creative communication is extremely good at formulating these complex relationships that we find difficult. And they can then strengthen our resilience if we know how to use them or how to use this kind of communication, what is this kind of knowledge that we can get from them.
Well, do you agree? So yeah, I would like now to invite you all to give your comments and views, and maybe you do have questions to the researchers. So please feel free to just write them down and hand them over to my colleagues sitting over there. And for you that are attending this cafe online, so please feel free to just scribble down, use the chat, so we access your questions and thoughts and talk about them here. And we also would like to record the session, and I would ask you now instantly if that would be okay for you, that we record this, or maybe rather ask if there's someone who doesn't want that. Okay, thank you. So please think about what you would like to add, your thoughts about this topic, and hand over the pieces of paper. And then I would like to ask you, Margaret, Connor, do you agree with what Beate just said, that, as I understand you, that cultural expressions of different kind would help us to be more resilient, to better cope with all these big challenges in society? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say ladies first.
Okay.
Margaret's not jumping to get in, so maybe I'll go.
Please.
Yeah, I suppose for me, it's not so much about how it gives us resilience. It's about how it helps us maybe to understand the problems better. Because I find with Kim Stanley Robinson, who writes like Cli-Fi, it's kind of climate science fiction. So he talks about what would happen if we don't address climate change. Then he also has a book, Ministry for Future, where we do solve it. And I think it's more effective, that storytelling and that narrative, and more imaginative, better, that we can connect with than conventional scientific communication that we've had for decades now, of people trying to tell us that we need to reduce our emissions or we need to do this. A lot of people would say COVID, the current energy crisis, climate are symptoms of this kind of ongoing issue, that we have bad connection to nature and we don't have bad connection to each other. And maybe it's through culture that we can understand those better or start to pick them up a bit better, because we all kind of live in our little, I don't know, boxes and get focused, but a bit like Beate was saying, we can get the complexities more out of movies and books maybe, and push us to be a bit more creative or imaginative than we can with other more conventional ways or to science communication.
So you mean like doing a Hollywood movie like this Don't Look Up about...
Look Up, yeah.
Maybe some of you saw it. Yeah. People are nodding.
I think anybody working in climate research can relate to a lot of elements of that movie, and it gets the word out there, doesn't it?
Right.
So it's quite effective in that sense.
Just telling you in the room, but if you like to write anything and think it's hard to find the English word, just write in Swedish and we will translate it for you. So just to make a shortcut. Mm-hmm. So Margaret, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's really this dealing with complex relationships. I think the arts is something that can really help, and in collaboration with the sciences. So doing more collaborative projects with different disciplines, I think we'll get that perspective wider and more better solutions possibly coming from it. The arts really gives us the space to imagine, as Connor said. And so, within science fiction, even in terms of dance, theater, performance, like we can create our own little worlds and sort of dive into these complex relationships without having, harmful situations to arise. So I think it gives us the space to really sort of explore and experiment and imagine different solutions that, in the past it's not been working so well. So what other ways can we change and adapt? And I think, the arts provides a really nice area to explore this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, yes. And also another thing in terms of it being right or wrong. So arts doesn't have any rights or wrongs. It's not logical. So that gives us even more room to sort of experiment with different ideas, different ways of doing things, different ways to obtain knowledge. So I think it's a really great area for exploration and imagination and better solutions.
Oh. So would you even say that you will become like a better human being or a better citizen by enjoying cultural expressions of different kinds? Or would that be to go too far? What do you say?
Yes.
Okay. Connor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's about appreciating that there's different worldviews, which is also a kind of personal journey I went on, coming from engineering and then working a lot with social sciences and then having to do a lot of community engagement. You just have to accept that it's not black and white. Engineers have a black and white view of the world, or economists, they say, we do this, it produces this, but in reality, you do this and, thousands of different things can happen because there's people there. It's not some analytical, technical thing. And I think, it's that more nuance or the diversity, I suppose, that we can explore better there, maybe in a more comfortable way than we can if we just have a conversation about it with someone. It can become quite antagonistic or something. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes, and maybe it's not so much about becoming a better person, but maybe that you have, as a both you get a broader horizon and you get different takes on it, but also that you have the possibility. I think it's important. It's not important, I think, to become a better person by having read a specific set of books, like these important books or that everybody says you should have read, but more about having arts and literature as a tool, being knowing that there are stories, there's a way to deal with these kind of complex questions that the contemporary time has in a different way than they are dealt with on Twitter or that they are dealt with in the news, and to recognize the connection in between. But then again, I mean, I'm a humanist scholar, I'm a literary scholar, so I'm very used to saying that when I look at literature, I say, well, there are different perspectives, and if I interpret, I know that a colleague of mine will have a different take on the same novel, and we are also very known for that kind of finding the problems under the surface. So this is maybe an important take of maybe having this kind of attitude in the public debate as well, not always wanting to go to the yes and no, and is this right or wrong, but maybe realizing that there are the challenges that we are facing are in fact so complex that it is very difficult knowing what is in this moment the right answer. And this is something, going back to this ambiguity and tolerance, we hate that. I think everybody, all the politicians, everybody has to decide really hates this. We all feel uncomfortable, and we need to get better to just recognizing, oh, I hate this, but I have to. This is something that goes with this challenge. And finishing that, yes, it is important with culture and art, but also I had a talk the other week with a friend who is a physician, who gave me his take on the energy crisis from the perspective of physics and natural science, where I also thought, wow, I have to take these aspects also in. It's not only about what kind of energy do I want sustainable energy, but also what is the situation now. So it is both like you said before, it is important not only to say one is better, but to realize that we need to cooperate and get different perspectives together, both the arts and scientific knowledge.
Yeah, right. So there are quite a few comments and questions. So Connor, for you, how do you transfer these small community meetings to large cities? How can you do that? And can you transfer the results?
Yes, very good question. That is something I did grapple with later when I was trying to finish up my PhD, and I had to present it at a Viva, and then you think about these broader how you repeat it. It was also asked at a conference when I presented at the work. What I have tried to do, but have been unsuccessful to get funded to actually do it. But I think the role at cities are indeed larger than just a small community group would be at municipal or local authority level. Like if you look at countries like Denmark, they have a lot of local control over their energy system, but also broader in society. Like 80% of public funding comes through the local authorities, so that if you can have decision making within that kind of context, that it has real impact because the policy is quite linked, perhaps, and it's a scale that is operable, perhaps. If you have citizens' assemblies or other deliberative forums where you try to bring in a representative population. Within Ireland, we have much less public spending at the local authority level. It's very little. It's about 17%, I think. So it's harder for them to enact change. But I do think that is where you can do it, because it's important when you do these engagements with people and you ask them what's a desirable future, what would you like to change, that does have carry on, or that does actually feed into policy, because it's they're giving up their time and they want to see something come out of it, or else they're just going to get fatigued with the whole process and then they won't participate as much. But you can see around the world and within Europe a lot of interest on more participative democracy, and also with the energy transition a move to a much more decentralized system, we would say, from a technical perspective, where it's more local and smaller micro generation, but also that decisions are being made at a more local level.
Right, right. So this is a tough one. Who would like to say something about this? What would you say is the most predominant feature of human technology? Margaret?
I mean, at the current moment, AI and robots. Artificial intelligence is going to vastly change the landscape of technology, and particularly for the younger generation. So it'd be interesting to sort of see what is productive about it and what is helpful about it, but also what is just to be aware of the consequences of it as well.
Do you agree, Connor?
I would have said smartphone. But maybe I have a personal gripe with smartphones. I think they do a lot of bad, which has been a long-held belief of mine, which has now become a little bit more popular as well. But I think, yeah, the smartphone has done a lot to kind of pull us away from each other and provides connectedness in one sense, but also destroyed a lot of interconnectedness, or ways where we would have just, had conversations with people, but now we Google something, or we message online instead of better interactions. So yeah, I would have gone with smartphone, and I think the rate of deployment of smartphones is just remarkable when you look at other technologies, and the time it took to get to 1 million users compared to smartphones. It's just, it's unprecedented.
Right.
Yes. I think that if the question is general about the most predominant feature of human technology, I'm an intermediate scholar, so I'm interested in the relation between literature and other media. So I would say the most predominant feature through time is this use of of using media, and in general, that we always use objects and material in our communication in order to get in contact with each other. And the digital media that we've spoken now are only the last ones and only the most predominant ones now for the moment. But that what then is also kind of predominant is that when we're used to these media, we don't notice them. We look through them, they get transparent. It's like, I still recall, as I'm old enough, when I first had my first smartphone, and it wasn't transparent at all. I couldn't even make a phone call, and my younger son said, "You'll get used to it. All grown-ups are in the beginning like that." But as soon as you are used to the technology, you do not notice it anymore, and you do not pay attention to how it transforms and forms and shapes the way how we can communicate and do get in contact with each other. So, and thinking about what is most predominant now, I think it's the part, not only the smartphone, but how all this digital, that all technology, much technology we use is digital and binary, which means that everything that needs to interact with computers needs to be broken down into yes and no, into 0 and 1. And this means that, talking about this ambiguous and the ambivalence, we have to have everything into a yes and no answer. And this is a bit of a problem. It's part of the huge possibilities of digital technology. This is why we can communicate with smartphones and computers in a wonderful way. But it is also, we notice how this yes, no, this either or tendency is very prominent in society as well, in polarization and other ways.
And there's a question from you related to this. So from the chat. So when social media is growing in use, will art have to change the way it talks and works? Because we people are getting less used to feel and understand the depth of arts. We might lack time and lack being, you know, quiet, but we need maybe to grasp the meaning of art, because, you know, so much is happening all the time for us.
This is a question I don't know what is the right answer to it, but I'm thinking a lot about it, both teaching literature and teaching, but also teaching literature in relation to other media. I think there are both answers possible, because of course digital media and even social media can be used in a creative and artistic way. You can have, for instance, there are novels on Twitter. There are social media adaptation of Romeo and Juliet that adapt the Shakespearean play as a kind of Facebook profiles that then post where the tragic plot unfolds in a series of related social media posts. This is fantastic. But as you said, the way how we interact with the media, with this fastness of digital media, also may have an effect that we shouldn't leave the other media and the analog media out, and that it is, I think, important not to drop everything that has been, keep up the possibility and the ability also for reading novels, for appreciating not only film but theater. But this is maybe not so as exclusive, because maybe like these adaptations that I told about maybe can serve as an entry point from the digital area that then connect to other and previous versions of the same stories.
Right. So Margaret, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. I mean, there's, it's really also just being attuned to, so social media is so pervasive in our society, and it does have some positives of creating global exchange and knowledge more and more. But I think what's really important too is just to create, it's almost like everybody needs to understand media studies now.
Yes.
And to really, have a critical lens to observe this, so that it's just not taken as point blank, that we really understand some of the issues that are arising because of social media, and in terms of misinformation, in terms of echo chambers, in terms of bodily changes, in terms of like body image and all these other things that are becoming more and more prevalent for younger generations because of sort of the dangers of social media. So COVID definitely pushed almost everything online and into social media, which was, for the arts, one of the only ways that we could have survived, to keep performing, to create telematic performances, and which has a long history way before, COVID hit. But so there's definitely positives to it, but I think, yeah, everybody sort of needs to understand the history of media studies and be aware of how to critically analyze all of this content that we're getting flooded with every day.
Okay, so Connor, I think this is a different take, but something for you to reflect on. So as students, we are constantly being informed about the climate crisis. So isn't art something that should provide an escape from reality?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll find humor is a good way to do it. Yeah. And so humor and comedy, so certainly art, yeah. I play guitar, that's kind of how I escape sometimes, or just go for a walk. But certainly, yeah. I think, yeah, it's important not to put too much, take on too much of a personal burden with the climate. You see, I mean, it's remarkable it changed in a decade from when I was a secondary school student to now. The pressure that's being put on students about, you know, this is your future, but you don't really have the agency to do anything about it, and we're not quite grasping with it yet. But so we leave them in a bad place there, where they would obviously, you know, on top of being teenagers, then they have this extra worry. So I think it's important, yeah, to try not to take too much personal burden, and to find your escape, whether it be art, music, whatever.
So what would you say is the most challenging regarding climate change and young people?
The most challenging?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose if you're under 18, the challenge is that you can't vote. So your agency is limited to perhaps trying to get your parents to do the thing. And in my personal experience, you know, it's hard to keep friends and be a climate advocate if there's people around you who are not as interested in it as you. So yeah, it could be quite isolating, perhaps. But I suppose the good thing to do is to, you know, figure out, if you really are interested, a career path that would lead you to working with people that are in that space. Because now, I mean, I've got lots of great colleagues that would have similar experiences to me, I suppose, to be the black sheep in their friends, but we're all the same person then in the office as well. So that's, eventually you do find that camaraderie in college, or perhaps in your career, if you get into a path that would lead you down to working in that field.
Okay.
May I add something to the question, whether if one is already constantly informed in school and in the news and about the climate crisis and other crises, and whether art then should not be something to escape. I think the role of art and culture in this resilience, it's not only about that novels, films, or art is about the crisis and the contemporary crisis, but that in a way every kind of that even art or narratives that are about something completely different, but for instance, such as Clockwork Orange is about makes things like classical music and violence collide and just say something about these things. We think they are completely different, but they are related. Or finding other forms of artistic ways to express these complexities that are so different to put down in a sentence, that this can help not only to escape, because I like to escape every evening with a TV show that is not too heavy, but or too difficult, but on the other hand to remember this kind of relationships, even when we are confronted with the challenging in the social world. Like, yes, I would like to know what is right now, but maybe I do not have the whole picture, and just realizing that, okay, this is how it is, and just not trying to take the whole burden, that making the situation more clear than it is.
There's a question to you about music and violence, which is this connection. Does that mean that music actually can be violent to us if it's not controlled?
Yes.
So please.
Also, there is this quote that I had in a lot of when I was working about it. It turned up in everything that I wrote about it. It's all music, no matter how sweet it is, can be used to cause violence, to cause pain. And this is and music has in history been used in conflict. Music is used to dominate other people, to show who is in control and who decides what kind of music sounds. So it's both about the social control of a physical space, and you all know that either if I get irritated on my teenagers because they play their music too loud, or one is disturbed by the music that the neighbor plays, but also which has to do that music is an art that builds on physical sound waves, that music can hurt physically, that it can be too loud, it can really hurt your ears. You feel the basses in a concert. So all this has been used in prisons, in the Nazi concentration camps, but also in other prisons, for instance, also in Iraq, to use music, maybe also music that you like, in order to make you feel pain. And this is then, of course, a very kind of double way of causing pain or showing domination, because it's both on a physical way but also on a mental way.
Okay, but let's turn it around and let's ask you, Margaret and Connor. Yeah. Can music, literature, other cultures expressions also be connected to resilience, and especially environmental resilience, so possible positive effects? What do you think? Margaret.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, dance and music have a lot of similarities between them as well. So it's, interesting to sort of hear this, and because they're both visceral, and both physical and mental. So in terms of resilience, I think a lot of strategies, particularly from dance or any movement-based practice, can really sort of help. And Connor was talking about this isolation, and art can be used as an escape, but it can also be used as strategies to sort of counteract a lot of harmful ways that we treat each other. So techniques of meditation, movement, imagery, and all can sort of help release a lot of trauma, help release a lot of anxiety, help release a lot of fears. So I think using some of that for more healing purposes can definitely help to become more resilient.
If I just may jump in there, because when I now first focused on this one aspect of the relation between how we relate to music, this is exactly the other side of the coin, that music can be used in the space to dominate, but it also connects us physically in space. And I also know, I have a colleague who does research about how music is used in art in order to make us understand a different way about how we relate to our environment. That it is not about we that are kind of culture and man, and that human perspective should be in the center, but that the way how sounds and music connects us with the surrounding can also be used in a way to understand another relationship to nature, to other creatures. So it's like with social media. It's neither good nor bad. It depends on how you use it.
Right, right. So there's another question for the chat. Maybe this is something for you, Connor. Could role play of crisis scenarios in schools be a good method to build resilience through experience and playing in a safe environment? So when teenagers then got to be the ones in power of handling the crisis. What do you think? And is that something have you such experiences from?
Yeah, with university students, like a mock UN. It's an exercise that actually it's been developed. It's got a computer tool with it, so you break up into continents, and then you have to agree your climate pledges, and then you go through a round of negotiations, and you put in your pledges, and you get back out your.
So pledges that would be like promises, or what?
The pledges would be, so we will reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050. The US say they'll get rid of coal by 2035. And then we put this into the computer, and then we see, half the Pacific Islands disappear by 2040. So we put a blue sheet over the Pacific Islands, and then they're kind of wiped out. But yeah, it helps, I suppose, to understand how challenging these things are, because we can say like our politicians are no good, and I would have certainly said they don't do what they're supposed to do. But having had a bit more exposure to them, you can really start to pity them a bit more in that it is very difficult to negotiate this, because it's so complex, and there is so much ambiguity, that bit that was mentioned earlier, because everyone has a different view on what a desirable future is, and they have different vested interests in how we get there as well. So I think role play is a very good way to explore those different views and those vested interests. There's also been research done in different workshop exercises of like taking on the role of a city planner and then trying to decide stuff on maps, and then again that can help you to think about the consequences. I suppose it's okay to say I want more solar panels, but when you actually get to trying to put them on the map, or putting wind turbines on the map, then you have to start thinking about these broader considerations about where they go, like which land is it going on, who's next door, and more kind of joint up thinking on that. And I suppose because it's role play as well, it gets you out of your own view and maybe to see it from someone else's perspective. So certainly I think role play is a useful tool.
Right. And is there research also to prove or to confirm that this is the case, that it can actually help you?
To broaden the perspectives, the post-evaluation is probably lacking as research to actually see. I mean, there is some research for, I have come across a couple of studies. That's usually missing. We don't go back to our participants and see what sort of impact it had on them, or did it change them. That's probably a gap. You would imagine it does improve understanding. We usually just assess climate literacy, which is more like understanding of technical rather than did it broaden their perspective. So that's a gap perhaps.
Right. But one could say that in my research, I came across research from the social sciences that says generally that when you have an experience of your own of ambiguity and ambivalence, that things aren't as easy and aren't black and white from your biography or from other experiences, then you are prone to be able to be a bit more ambiguity tolerant in other situations as well. So having not only the knowledge but maybe the experience from being in that game and kind of I will have to cope between what I can negotiate and what I want, and not only thinking about it but experiencing it in the game is a first step that, according to this research, then indicates it should have an effect, one could say at least.
Right. So Margaret, I think this is for you. So how does music and other cultural expressions affect the brain and the release of hormones of different kinds? I know you're not a physician, obviously, but I guess you have some thoughts about this.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely am not in science or neuroscience. Neuroscience is very, very complex, and they actually are working with a lot of dancers, and still it's very, very complicated. But in terms of, what movement practices and even breathing techniques can do, I mean, and this has been scientifically proven that, it can release, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. So it actually is going to make you feel better and feel less anxious. Also, in terms of of breathing. It's going to get into that parasympathetic nervous system. So it is actually proven to be able to calm you down. So in terms of actually, learning strategies to become more resilient and to become more calm about the situation, breathing and moving are extremely important to know and understand and to put into your life.
Can we try this right now? Is it possible?
Sure.
Yeah.
So there is.
So what should we do?
Yeah. So there's a technique called the box breathing, and this is actually used by the Navy SEALs to stay calm and focused in very, very tense situation. And it's very simple. You inhale for 4 counts. You hold that for 4 counts. You exhale for 4 counts, and you hold for 4 counts. So to start, we'll just exhale all of your breath in your body. So just take a nice exhale.
Yes.
And then we'll start to inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold 4, 3, 2, 1, and repeat, repeat, repeat until you feel better.
Do you feel a difference from one round only? Maybe, maybe not.
It slows down. Also, to 4 is really hard. You really have to slow down.
It's actually recommended to even for 6 counts before you're going to sleep. So you really are getting more carbon dioxide in your body, which is just sort of to help increase circulation and also to make you calmer.
Thank you. So I think we need to try to wrap this up. So I do have a single last question to the 3 of you researchers. I guess it's a quite tough one, but let's try. So what would be your single most important piece of advice in order to better cope with all those large, grand, global challenges of today? What would you say, Connor?
Question. I think the short answer I came up with earlier is to read Humankind, A Hopeful History. It's a very book by Rutger Bregman, and it kind of talks about how in crisis is actually when we're our best. That's when humans come together around a unified goal, and we can get past some of the stuff maybe that we couldn't before a crisis and actually work together on things. And the other thing, I suppose, would be to go back to something that we said earlier and to find your escape. I mean, I don't watch documentaries about climate change in the evening. I watch trash TV, a bit like Beate said earlier, because I see enough climate change during the day. I think you need to switch off and, find a way to get away at times. And maybe you feel like you should be doing more, but, don't take too much of a personal burden for what is these global existential threats that we're trying to deal with, as a collective rather than as a single person.
Did you mention a book title?
Yeah, sorry.
I didn't get that.
A Hopeful History.
Sorry, one more time.
Humankind, A Hopeful History.
Humankind of.
I'll put it in the chat, will I?
Yeah, please do. And the author would be.
It looks at so the cities that got bombed the most in the Second World War produced the most armor and the most bombs because they were kind of motivated by this. That they came together, which is kind of counterintuitive. And there's all these other stories about how we think man is bad and greedy, but actually it's good. That's kind of a misperception that we have.
Right.
I should say human. Sorry, it's usually a man in the past.
Okay, so let's go to Margaret. What would be your piece of advice to us?
Well, as I come from dance, I'm going to say tune to your body, to your feeling, your sensations, to keep imagination and creativity, to keep breathing, to keep moving. Hopefully this will allow us to adapt change and to also work together more creatively and collaboratively.
Thank you. Beate?
Yes. Together with this, with these very good advices, maybe when these uncomfortable feelings arise, it's kind of ambiguity and tolerance, and one just wants to stop it and to resolve it, and maybe only to, maybe just try to accept it or just notice it. I notice it. You do not have, one does not have to solve the problems, but just noticing that this, I find this really difficult. Even if one does not know in the situation how to solve it, like Connor said, also it's kind of yeah, together with the breathing, together with the escape, and together with seeing the complexities, that there are always different perspectives and different narratives going on at the same time, and we do not really know what will happen. And yes,
it's a complex word.
Yes,
right. So I would like to thank you everyone for attending this Science Cafe and for contributing to it. And I would like to ask you to please answer some very short evaluation questions. So we do have a QR code, so feel free to scan that to just answer a few questions. And of course, a special thank you to our researchers, to Connor and Margaret and Beate, and to this venue, which is the House of Science in Stockholm, and to my colleagues from VA, which is Vetenskap Allmänhet, or Public in Science in English, and of course the technical crew from Mediamera, and our collaboration partner, which is Science in the City, Malta. And I hope you do enjoy the reminder of this European Researchers' Night. Thank you so much.